Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling, well, it's a huge task, isn't it?
It really is. We're trying to synthesize this massive amount of material. We're talking sources covering, what, 2 centuries?
Yeah, easily. Spanning continents, industries.
Yeah.
You've got 19th century oil barons rubbing shoulders with 21st century AI developers in our reading list.
And the goal here isn't just history. We're looking for the common recipe, the blueprint.
Exactly. What are the repeatable methods? The strategies, maybe the ones that aren't so obvious? And what about the relationships? How do people actually get extreme wealth?
And not just get it, but how do they hold on to it, consolidate it, and then, crucially, how do they project that power? Financially, politically, globally.
So think of this deep dive as an anatomy lesson, the anatomy of financial dominance. We know you need to grasp these complex systems quickly, so we've tailored this for you.
Right, let's jump straight in. Where better to start than the fastest engine of change right now, this whole new ecosystem of capital and innovation.
And right at the heart of that is the AI revolution. Let's talk about the speed.
Okay, so if you think about the big transformations in the past, like steam power, right? The Industrial Revolution, or electricity becoming widespread.
Yeah, those were enormous shifts.
Huge, but they unfolded over generations. I mean, society, labor markets, they had decades, literally decades, to sort of adjust, muddle through maybe.
But AI, the sources are really clear on this. It's different. The speed is just something else entirely.
Completely unprecedented. We're not talking about several generations here. The major economic impact, it's happening within one generation.
That's staggering. Time is just compressed in a way we haven't seen.
And it's not random, the speed. It comes down to the infrastructure that's already in place. There are catalysts now that, Rockefeller and Carnegie just didn't have.
Okay, that's a critical point.
Yeah.
If we want to understand modern wealth accumulation, we need to get what's driving this acceleration. What are these catalysts that steam and electricity lacked?
Well, you can boil it down to maybe 3 main things. First, obviously, the internet. Ubiquitous, high-speed, global connections linking talent, capital, ideas instantly.
Right, no waiting for ships or telegraph.
Exactly. Second, cloud computing and storage. It's incredibly cheap now. Startups, research labs, they can tap into massive processing power without needing, a fortune upfront for hardware.
Democratizes access to computing power, in a way.
In a big way.
Yeah.
And third, maybe the most crucial, data. Mass amounts of data, a lot of it open source, available for training these AI models.
Okay, so you combine instant global communication, cheap supercomputing, and vast data sets.
And boom, you get this high-velocity transition. It completely bypasses the slow, physical rollout of infrastructure that took decades back in the 19th and 20th centuries.
And that speed, well, it has consequences. The impact on jobs looks like it's going to be pretty brutal and fast.
Yeah, the sources really hammer this point. It's not like past industrial shifts where maybe you saw job creation through de-skilling simply tasks on an assembly line, say.
No, this looks more like direct job replacement.
Exactly. Increasingly intelligent machines taking over tasks that humans used to do. Administrative work, cognitive tasks, even some repetitive industrial stuff.
Sure, people talk about new jobs, AI
Yes.
trainers, drone operators, prompt engineers.
And those jobs will exist, absolutely. But the sheer scale of displacement across so many existing sectors, it's hard to see how retraining keeps pace with that AI adoption curve. The adjustment for millions of people could be really disruptive and potentially very long.
This technological edge immediately shapes the global power map. The sources talk about a kind of bipolar AI world order emerging.
Yeah, essentially the US and China, they have what the sources call an enormous lead. And it's not just a lead, it's potentially a permanent one.
Why permanent?
Because it feeds itself. It's this virtuous cycle. The best AI talent tends to congregate in those 2 countries.
Okay.
And the biggest companies there, the tech giants, they collect the most data, proprietary data, user data, you name it.
More data means better AI models.
Right. Better models attract more talent, which builds better products.
Which attracts more users.
Which generates even more data. See the cycle. The gap between the US and China and, well, pretty much everyone else isn't just staying the same. It's widening, accelerating.
It explains that competitive intensity. I like that anecdote in the source material. The joke among Chinese tech entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah, about the time difference.
Right. How far behind Silicon Valley are you in AI research? And the answer is
16 hours. The actual time difference between California and Beijing.
It's funny, but it perfectly captures that speed. An insight published in the U.S. is basically actionable in China almost instantaneously. The knowledge transfer is incredibly fast and open. in many ways.
But China has another layer to its power here, the state. It's not just free market forces.
Okay. How does the state play a role?
Well, we saw this huge push under the banner of mass innovation and mass entrepreneurship. Sounded kind of bureaucratic, maybe.
But the impact?
Oh, the practical effect was massive. You had mayors being pushed to create innovation zones everywhere, offering tax breaks, cheap land, subsidized offices.
Right.
And crucially, the government backed these enormous venture capital funds. They essentially stepped in to de-risk early-stage innovation, especially in sectors Beijing saw as strategic priorities.
So channeling capital, directing the flow.
Exactly. It's top-down guidance, making sure that investment isn't just scattered randomly, but focused on building national champions.
And their market tactics can be incredibly aggressive. The sources call it the going heavy strategy.
Yeah, using sheer capital weight to basically buy market dominance, especially in infrastructure. Mobile payments is the classic example.
How did that work?
Think about the early days of ride-hailing in China. Drivers, riders, they were used to cash. Getting them to switch to mobile wallets wasn't easy.
Inertia is powerful.
Very. So Tencent steps in with WeChat Wallet. To force adoption, they just threw money at it. Massive subsidies. They literally paid both the rider and the driver extra money if the payment went through WeChat Wallet.
Wait, so the rider pays less than the fare, the driver gets more than the fare.
And Tencent covers the difference for both. It's completely unsustainable economically in the short term, but they weren't playing a short-term game.
They were buying the market.
Precisely. Pouring in hundreds of millions, maybe billions, to lock in users and establish their payment system as essential infrastructure. It compressed a market shift that might have taken 10 years into, like, 1 or 2. That's how you build inescapable platforms and, well, the billionaires who run them.
Okay, so that's the macro picture, the state-level plays. But let's shift to the individuals, the tech founder playbook. There's a real contrast, especially looking at someone like Elon Musk.
Right. His whole philosophy seems incredibly product-first, almost obsessively so.
His core idea being, if the product is truly great, truly excellent engineering, sales will just happen.
Pretty much. He sees salesmanship as, I don't know, maybe a necessary evil sometimes, but ideally unnecessary if the product itself is compelling enough.
And this causes friction,
Yeah.
right? Remember that quote where he blasts aggressive sales tactics, the
Yeah.
commission-based stuff he compared it to?
Yeah, schemes that go door to door selling you boxes of knives.
That's it. It shows this real, almost visceral dislike for what he sees as pushing a product rather than letting it pull customers in.
Definitely. His focus is laser sharp on the engineering, the physics, the aesthetics, which can sometimes baffle or even tick off the people whose job it actually is to sell the thing.
But this intensity, this product focus, it's often paired with this really high-risk personality.
Right.
The sources call the burn the boats mentality.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Like that moment described where he just decides, impulsively it seems, to cancel the Falcon Heavy rocket program.
The whole thing. Just like that.
Yeah, redirect everything, all resources, all personnel, towards accelerating Starship development. It's pure conviction. You force the future you want by destroying the alternatives.
That takes guts. Or maybe something else.
Well, this is where the internal dynamics become so important.
Yeah.
You often need that massive ego, that willingness to take huge risks to create something truly revolutionary and accumulate that kind of wealth. But sustained success often needs checks and balances. The sources note that when Musk made that call to cancel Falcon Heavy, executives immediately started texting Gwynne Shotwell.
Ah, Shotwell, the president COO of SpaceX, known for being pragmatic, operational.
Exactly. The trusted advisor. The one with the credibility, apparently, to actually push back. She had to step in and basically say, hold on, we can't cancel Falcon Heavy.
Why not?
Because it was crucial for winning those big money military and intelligence launch contracts. That was the steady revenue stream funding the moonshot projects like Starship.
So she provided the reality check.
Yeah.
The context.
Right. She had to rein in the impulsive genius. It's a great illustration that even in these super fast, high-stakes environments, you still need structure. You need trusted relationships. You need someone who can say no, or at least not yet.
And underlying all this, whether it's rockets or software or, well, anything really, is this fundamental idea of iteration.
Absolutely. We sometimes have this romantic notion of innovation as a single flash of brilliance, a light bulb moment.
But it's rarely like that, is it?
Almost never. It's about repeated, relentless refinement, improvement, trying something, seeing what works, what doesn't, and doing it again, but better.
The sources use the example of Allbirds shoes. Not exactly high-tech rockets.
Right. But the principle's the same. They didn't just stumble upon wool. They iterated constantly on the fabric itself, refining the material, getting R&D grants to improve it until it met their exact needs. The product evolved through that process.
Or even something as basic as luggage. The first version is never the final version.
Never. It's that process of iteration, of stripping away what's unnecessary, honing in on the core function, the core value. That's what builds lasting products and ultimately market dominance and valuable intellectual property.
Okay, so AI and modern tech feel incredibly fast, almost alien sometimes. But the core strategies for getting and keeping extreme wealth, they're actually pretty old, aren't they?
Oh, completely. The Gilded Age in America. That's basically the masterclass, the definitive blueprint for how you achieve monopoly and control the entire supply chain.
And you can't talk about that era without talking about John D. Rockefeller, what was really driving him with Standard Oil.
The sources emphasize his obsession with order. He came up in an oil industry that was pure chaos. Especially the railroads transporting the oil, they were locked in these brutal, unpredictable price wars.
So freight rates would swing wildly.
Exactly. One day it's cheap to ship, the next day it's cripplingly expensive. That kind of volatility is terrible for planning, for building a stable business. Rockefeller hated it. He wanted predictability, stability, something that let him plan and profit consistently, even when the economy tanked.
And his genius move was creating this Standard Oil Combine, the SIC. How did that bring order?
It wasn't just about controlling oil, it was about controlling the transport of oil. The SIC acted as this neutral third party, an evener, they called it. It stepped in to stop the railroads from undercutting each other into bankruptcy over oil freight.
So it arbitrated the price wars.
Essentially, yes. It guaranteed each major railroad a specific, predetermined share of the oil traffic. Like, the Pennsylvania Railroad might be guaranteed 45% of Standard Oil's business. No more fighting for scraps.
Wow, so Standard Oil becomes the indispensable intermediary, the one who guarantees stability for the railroad.
Precisely. And in return for providing that order, Rockefeller gained immense leverage over them. He effectively controlled the infrastructure his product relied on. It insulated Standard Oil from the market chaos, letting him grow steadily while rivals who were still subject to those volatile rates struggled or failed.
That theme, seizing control of critical infrastructure, that was Cornelius Vanderbilt's playbook too, right?
Absolutely, another giant of the era. And his story, particularly around the Nicaragua transit rights, shows the kind of ruthlessness often needed when your control slips.
This was before the Panama Canal, so that route across Nicaragua was vital.
Hugely important. The fastest way to get gold prospectors, mail, commerce between the Atlantic and Pacific coasts. Big money involved.
And the company controlling it, Accessory Transit, got into trouble.
Went bankrupt. And Vanderbilt, who was already a major creditor, saw his chance. He didn't just wait for the bankruptcy courts. He used his position as creditor to basically force the sale of the company's most valuable assets, the steamships, directly to himself and his family.
Sounds like a classic asset strip.
Yeah.
Just taking the good stuff.
That's certainly what it looked like, but Vanderbilt, being Vanderbilt, framed it very differently.
Oh.
He argued he was actually protecting the stockholders. He claimed that by taking the ships himself, he was preventing them from being scattered to other creditors. He was preserving the assets needed to potentially restart the transit service. Under his control, of course.
I'll save the property for you by taking it myself.
Pretty much. He told stockholders he would reestablish the company. In reality, he secured personal control over the vital infrastructure, locking down that strategic transit link for himself. Pure power play, dressed up as responsible management.
Okay. Moving from transport to industry steel.
Yeah.
Andrew Carnegie. Same drive to dominate.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe even more intense, more personal. Carnegie Steel didn't just want to compete. It aimed to crush. Utterly.
There's that story about Illinois Steel, a rival winning an armor plate contract.
Yeah, Carnegie apparently went ballistic. He saw it as a personal affront, called their bid pure spite, a foul blow. Besides, it wasn't just business. It was like they'd insulted his honor or something.
And his reaction wasn't just anger. It was action, expansion.
Immediately. He basically tells his partner, Henry Clay Frick, look, we're doing well right now. Others are struggling. This is the moment. His exact words, according to the source, were, now is the time to drive our stakes in everywhere and command the situation.
Wow. Command the situation. That says it all.
It really does. It's the predator's instinct. When you're strong and your rivals are weak, you don't just consolidate, you press the advantage. You expand aggressively, take market share, force them out.
But achieving that kind of dominance also required getting his own house in order. the reorganization into Carnegie Steel, with Frick as a key architect. That involved this really restrictive agreement, didn't it? The ironclad.
Yes, and it caused internal friction. Even close partners weren't always happy. Harry Phipps, one of the original partners, apparently hated this new agreement, even though he'd helped draft similar ones before.
He didn't like taking his own medicine, as the source puts it.
Exactly. It shows that even within the inner circle, consolidating power to that extreme degree, demanding that level of centralized control needed for a near monopoly. It can be tough. People resist giving up their autonomy, even partners.
These historical examples, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, they feel very relevant when we look at modern wealth concentration through the lens of economists like Thomas Piketty, especially his famous formula, RG.
Yes, RG. It sounds academic, but it's incredibly important for understanding why wealth inequality can become so entrenched, so structurally embedded in the system.
Okay, break it down.
R is the average rate of return on capital. Think profits, dividends, interest, rent income you get from owning assets.
And G?
G is the rate of economic growth. How fast the overall economy, national income, is expanding.
So RG means the return on capital is higher than the growth rate of the economy. What does that mean for most people, for you listening?
It means that wealth accumulated in the past, capital, tends to grow faster on its own than the economy as a whole, and certainly faster than wages, which tend to track G.
So if you already have a lot of money.
Your money makes money faster than someone can typically earn it through working, especially when economic growth is slow, which it has been in many developed countries for a while now.
The gap just widens automatically.
Pretty much
right?
compounds. So, inherited wealth, large existing fortunes, they gain this outsized importance. They pull away from income earned through labor. It's not necessarily about being smarter or working harder. It's the structural advantage of already having capital in a slow growth world.
Piketty's data showed this historically too, right? In Europe especially.
Yeah, he pointed out that in 19th and early 20th century Europe, the capital to income ratio, the total value of private wealth compared to national income was really high, like 6 or 7 to 1. Higher than in the US at the time, which was more like 4 or 5 to 1.
Why the difference?
Europe had older, more established fortunes, more concentrated inherited wealth. The US had more widely distributed land, newer money, a bit less concentration initially. But Piketty notes that Europe's ratio is back up near 6 again now, suggesting a return to that high concentration of capital.
And this ratio ties directly into how the economic pie is split, right? The capital-labor split.
Exactly. Back in 19th century Britain, for example, about 40% of the national income went to capital rent, profits, dividends. The other 60% went to labor wages. That 40% chunk flowing to capital owners constantly reinforces their position, especially when that capital is passed down through generations. It fuels that RG dynamic and puts constant upward pressure on inequality.
Okay, so we've seen how individual genius, iteration, and monopolistic control build fortunes. But the sources make it really clear. None of that lasts. None of it reaches extreme levels without engaging with the state.
Absolutely. You can't sustain that kind of wealth in a vacuum. You eventually have to navigate and often influence or even capture political power. This is where crony capitalism and state capture come in.
Let's start with that Asian example, the Hong Kong Bank. It wasn't just a bank, was it?
Not at all. For a long time, it was basically the unofficial central bank of Hong Kong. It had incredible privileges, like using the entire banking system's surplus funds, interest-free.
Wow. Free money, essentially.
Pretty much. And the government protected this position. There was a moratorium on new bank licenses until 1978, locking in Hong Kong Bank's dominance.
So a state-backed protected institution. How did it leverage that to shape wealth?
It played a direct role in shifting economic power. The sources describe it presiding over an orderly and highly profitable transfer of economic control from British to Chinese companies. Meaning, it actively financed and supported the rising local Chinese tycoons, the godfathers, as the source calls them, when they launched takeovers of the established, often weakening, British colonial firms, the Hongs.
So the bank was essentially picking winners, facilitating the rise of a new elite.
You can certainly see it that way. It ensured the new generation of Chinese conglomerates were powerful, but also deeply connected to and probably indebted to the bank itself. It managed the transition of power.
But these kinds of close ties between finance and favored players, that opens the door to abuse, right? Like related party lending.
Absolutely. It's almost inevitable when regulation is weak or selectively enforced. Look at the case of Jamsil Nursalim in Indonesia.
An ethnic Chinese tycoon, right? built up his bank, BD&I, very quickly.
Very quickly. And according to the sources, engaged in an orgy of related party lending, just funneling huge amounts of the bank's money, depositors' money, ultimately into his own businesses.
That sounds risky.
Extremely. And when the Asian financial crisis hit in the late 90s, it all blew up. BD&I needed massive bailouts from the central bank.
And Slim had to pay it back.
Well, the state demanded repayment, but his collateral was questionable. He offered up a shrimp farm, claiming it was worth $1.8 billion.
$1 billion shrimp farm.
That's what he claimed. But later, government auditors looked at the exact same asset and valued it at just $100 million.
Whoa, that's not even close. $1.8 billion versus $100 million.
It's staggering, isn't it? It just perfectly illustrates how these cozy relationships and opaque dealings allow wealth to be massively inflated on paper, shielding personal fortunes while the public often picks up the tab when things go wrong.
Okay, let's shift to Russia. State capture there seems even more direct, more brutal, especially after the 1998 currency crash.
Yeah, that crash was a pivotal moment. It created this instant, almost unbelievable wealth transfer mechanism.
How did that work?
Simple, really. Russian companies, especially in oil and resources, were selling their products internationally for US dollars, a stable, hard currency. But their costs, labor, supplies, taxes, bribes, were mostly paid in Russian rubles, which had just collapsed in value.
So revenue in strong dollars, costs in weak rubles.
Exactly. Overnight, profit margins just exploded. The sources estimate potential profit increases of anywhere from 100% to 700%. It was a massive, sudden windfall, transferring wealth from the general populace to the oligarchs controlling those resource flows.
And Putin moved quickly to consolidate control over this new landscape.
He did. Publicly, he talked about administrative reforms, tackling corruption, using market forces to clean things up.
But behind the scenes,
He was moving decisively to assert state control, or rather his control, over property and key financial flows. Power became concentrated in a very small, exclusive circle of business people loyal to him. Interestingly, sources note he often sidelined his own official economic advisors during key decisions.
privatizing policymaking, in a sense.
You could say that. The Yukos affair is the textbook example of how this worked. Yukos was a huge, successful private oil company run by Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who started getting politically ambitious.
Bad move in Putin's Russia.
Very bad move. The state went after Yukos, hit it with massive back tax claims, and seized its main production subsidiary, Yugoslav. This prize asset was then put up for auction.
And who bought it?
A completely unknown entity called Baikal Finance Group, which seemed to have been created just days before the auction. It bought this incredibly valuable asset for a surprisingly low price.
Suspiciously low.
Extremely. And when Putin was asked about Baikal Finance, he gave this very vague, coy answer about its shareholders being private individuals who'd been involved in business in the energy sphere for many years. Pure deflection.
Because the very next day,
Baikal Finance Group was acquired by Rosneft, the state-owned oil company.
So a quick shuffle. Seize the asset, sell it cheaply to an anonymous shell company, which then immediately sells it to the state-owned champion.
Exactly. A convoluted process designed to give a veneer of legality to what was essentially the expropriation and renationalization of a key asset. Yugoslav pumped 1 million barrels of oil a day. It sent a crystal clear message. In Russia, property rights, private wealth, it's all ultimately conditional on political loyalty. The state, meaning Putin, holds ultimate control.
And the system has a real human cost. The sources mentioned Sergei Magnitsky.
Yeah, his story is incredibly grim. He was a lawyer who uncovered a massive tax fraud scheme allegedly involving Russian officials. He testified about it, was arrested, imprisoned, and died in custody under highly suspicious circumstances.
And the official response.
The official state investigation found no wrongdoing by officials in his death, despite credible evidence of neglect and likely torture. It's a chilling reminder that when the state controls property and power so absolutely, it also controls the truth, the legal system, and ultimately people's lives.
Okay, let's bring it back to the U.S. The interplay between wealth and politics looks different, maybe less overt, but still incredibly powerful. It's often about networks and shaping the intellectual landscape.
Right. The Koch brothers are presented as a key example here. Their approach wasn't just lobbying for specific bills, though they certainly do that. It's been a much longer game.
What's the strategy?
It's about building and funding an entire ecosystem. Subsidizing networks of think tanks, specific academic programs in universities, activist groups, legal foundations, all geared towards promoting a particular free market, limited government ideology.
A long and remarkable battle of ideas, as the source puts it.
Exactly. It's about shifting the entire debate over decades, funding the research that supports your worldview, training the next generation of policymakers and judges, challenging regulations in court. It's about making your preferred policies like lower taxes, deregulation seem like the default, common sense, intellectually rigorous option.
Building an ideological infrastructure.
That's a good way to put it. And this infrastructure was mobilized very effectively to defend things like the carried interest tax loophole.
Yes. The loophole that lets private equity and hedge fund managers pay a much lower capital gains tax rate on a large portion of their income, rather than the higher ordinary income tax rate.
Exactly. It's worth billions to the industry. And when House Democrats tried to close this loophole, the reaction from some in the financial elite was, well, extreme doesn't quite cover it.
Stephen Schwarzman, the head of Blackstone, what did he say?
He didn't just argue against it, he called the effort to close the loophole a war.
A war?
Yeah, and then he compared it, unbelievably, to when Hitler invaded Poland in 1939.
Wow, that's quite a comparison for a tax policy change.
It's utterly hyperbolic, obviously, but it shows the sheer intensity, the perceived stakes involved in protecting these mechanisms that shield immense wealth from higher taxation. It reveals how intertwined financial interests and political rhetoric can become.
So we've covered accumulation through innovation and monopoly. We've covered securing it through political influence. But there's a final piece, isn't there? Controlling the narrative. Projecting the right image.
Absolutely. Image is a form of capital. You can't just be rich. You often need to project power, legitimacy, maybe even a sense of destiny or inevitability.
Oprah is a fascinating case study here. Her rise was meteoric, but it wasn't just talent.
No, the sources describe it as a perfect storm. You had her Oscar nomination for The Color Purple, giving her critical acclaim, combined with her talk show going into syndication nationwide. And all of this was amplified by what the source calls an unprecedented promotional blitz. Image creation was key from the start.
And she understood the power that came with that fame and wealth. She's quoted saying something like,
Yeah, nobody listens to you unless you have some bling, some money, some clout, some access, a very candid admission of how power works.
and this awareness led to this carefully managed environment around her, this expectation of
Adoring routine is the phrase used. The idea that everyone around her, staff, guests, the audience, was expected to constantly affirm her status, her success.
which leads to that uncomfortable anecdote about the audience member.
Right, the mentally challenged man who, for whatever reason, wasn't applauding along with everyone else. And Oprah apparently singled him out, mocked him, demanded he participate in the adoring routine.
It's a jarring moment.
It is. It suggests maybe a certain vulnerability behind the immense success, a need for constant external validation, and perhaps an intolerance for anything that disrupts the carefully constructed image.
If Oprah mastered the art of connection and relatability, Steve Jobs mastered the art of mystique and calculated PR.
Oh, absolutely. The ultimate showman of tech. He learned early on how to use drama and exclusivity to build buzz and amplify his own genius, doling out interviews like royal audiences.
Like the launch of the Lisa computer, that wasn't just a press conference.
No way. Select journalists brought one by one into this fancy suite at the Carlisle Hotel. The computer displayed perfectly amidst expensive cut flowers. It was pure theater, controlled, curated access.
And the Macintosh launch.
Yeah.
That was peak Jobsian theater.
Totally. The darkened auditorium, the tension building, then running that iconic 1984 Super Bowl ad, then him walking out, playing the theme from Chariots of Fire.
It's almost absurd when you describe it.
It is. And then the reveal. Pulling the little 3.5-inch floppy disk from his shirt pocket, putting it in the machine, and the words insanely great appearing on the screen. It wasn't just selling a computer. It was crafting a legend, creating a technological messiah myth that defined Apple for decades.
Sometimes, though, that grand vision, that projection of image, it can tip over into, well, something else. WeWork and Adam Neumann.
Right. Neumann was a master storyteller. He somehow convinced incredibly sophisticated investors, people like Barry Sternlicht, that WeWork wasn't just a company leasing office space.
No, it was a community, a tech play.
Exactly. That narrative, that projected image, was absolutely essential to justify the insane valuations it achieved, valuations that had no basis in traditional real estate metrics. He sold the future, the vision, the image.
And it seems like he really started to believe his own hype. The grandiosity got pretty extreme.
Off the charts, talking about WeWork lasting for millennium, investing in companies trying to achieve immortality, like Life Biosciences. And that incredible quote about believing that if WeWork hit the biggest valuation, he'd be the one world leaders would call to solve global conflicts when they started shooting at one another.
He genuinely thought financial success equaled geopolitical problem-solving genius.
That's the ultimate self-mythologizing, isn't it? Equating net worth with global influence and wisdom. The image becomes the reality, in his own mind at least.
This drive for dominance, whether it's tech or finance, it takes a toll. It requires intense psychological fortitude. Look at the hedge fund world, like SAC Capital under Stephen Cohen.
Yeah, that's a high-pressure, high-stakes environment. And the source reveals Cohen actually employed a psychiatrist, a performance coach really, named Ari Kiev.
Not just for general mental health, but for something specific.
Specifically to help his traders manage their emotions, particularly the intense anxiety around losing money. Fear is a huge factor in trading, and Cohen wanted his team conditioned to handle it, to perform under pressure.
So Key was there giving motivational talks, coaching sessions.
Yeah, spending whole days at the SAC offices. It shows that at the highest levels of finance, managing psychology, managing fear, is seen as just as critical as the financial modeling or the trading algorithms. You're building financial athletes, in a way.
That fear of loss, that need for confidence, it ties directly into the mechanics of how some parts of finance work, especially the leverage used by firms like Lehman Brothers before the crash.
Absolutely. Lehman, like other independent broker-dealers, was running on incredible leverage, using maybe $1 of its own equity to support $30 of debt.
30-to-1 leverage. That sounds precarious.
Extremely precarious. It means the whole operation relies heavily on short-term funding, often through the repo market. And in that market, confidence is everything. It is the capital, in a sense.
So, if confidence wavers,
If the market suddenly doubts your ability to cover that massive debt load, even for a day, the short-term lenders just stop lending. They pull back. You face margin calls you can't meet.
and because the equity cushion is so thin,
Right, that 30-to-1 ratio means there's no room for error. The money, that leveraged position, just evaporates almost instantly. Lehman didn't slowly decline. It collapsed when confidence disappeared. The entire structure was built on belief, and when a belief vanished, so did the firm.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground, from 19th century railroads and oil to modern AI, finance, state capture. Let's try and pull it all together. What's the common blueprint for extreme wealth and power that emerges from all these sources?
I think we can see 4 really consistent interlocking themes that make up this anatomy of power. First, there's speed, especially now. The ability to leverage new technologies, new ecosystems, AI, data, the cloud, to get dominance fast. Sometimes even forcing the market through sheer capital, like Tencent did with payments.
Okay, speed. What's second?
Second is monopolistic control. Mastering the supply chain, controlling critical infrastructure, or owning the key information flow. Whether it's Rockefeller making Standard Oil the evener for the railroads, Vanderbilt grabbing transit rights, or modern tech giants controlling data and platforms, you carve out a space where you dictate the terms.
Right. Avoid pure competition if you can. Third,
Inescapable political maneuvering. You have to engage with the state. It runs the gamut, right? From the sort of backroom cronyism of the Hong Kong bank managing wealth transfer to the incredibly sophisticated, long-term ideological battles waged by networks like the Kochs to shape policy and protect things like carried interest, all the way to the outright state capture and asset stripping we saw in Russia. You either leverage state power or neutralize its ability to hinder you.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And the final piece.
The fourth thread is perception management. Controlling the image. It's Steve Jobs' product launch theater, Oprah demanding that adoring routine, Adam Newman selling a vision of community and tech, even Stephen Cohen using a psychiatrist to build psychological dominance in his traders. You have to project success, inevitability, genius. It attracts capital, talent, and builds the brand.
So speed, monopoly, political skill, and image control.
Pretty much, and the underlying theme across all eras, whether it's railroads or AI, seems to be this. The truly massive enduring fortunes find ways to operate outside the constraints of a purely competitive market.
How so?
Either they achieve a near-perfect monopoly where they are the market, setting the prices, controlling the flow, or they skillfully use the power of the state regulations, subsidies, tax breaks, or even direct asset transfers to create barriers to entry and protect their position.
Which brings us back to Piketty and that RG idea. If rent is what capital earns in a supposedly pure and perfect market just by existing, it leaves us with a really provocative final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah. How much of the extreme wealth we see today is actually rent in that pure passive sense? And how much of it is really profit that's been actively extracted? Extracted through strategic monopolistic control, through shaping regulations, through operating in markets that were deliberately made imperfect, often for the benefit of a very select few.
Is it earned rent, or is it extracted profit? That question really gets to the heart of how economic power seems to function today. Something to think about.